Well, do you ever suffer from abdominal pain, diarrhea, or vomiting? Those symptoms are associated with inflammatory bowel disease, and we're just learning that as Canadians, we suffer from the symptoms more than anyone else in the world. You may know the diseases as Crohn's and colitis, but the illness is still a bit of a mystery to researchers, and there aren't a lot of remedies. We want to hear from you if you have had any of those symptoms, or if you've been diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis, and what you do to feel better. You can call us at 514-597-4500. A free call across Quebec, 1-877-597-4500. Or you can text us at 22222. If you know someone who suffers from IBS, we'd also, if you're interested in sharing the experience, you can let us know. Well, Dr. John D. Rioux is an associate professor of medicine at the Université de Montréal and the Montreal Heart Institute. He's also Canada's research chair in genetics and genomic medicine of inflammation. Dr. Rioux, welcome to Radio Noon.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, we start off by explaining for people who aren't familiar, what are Crohn's and colitis?
Sure. Actually, maybe if I can just start off by saying it's not IBS, it's actually IBD.
IBD.
So IBS is irritable bowel syndrome,
right,
and IBD is inflammatory bowel disease. And IBD, better known as Crohn's and colitis, are chronic inflammatory diseases, as you described, can lead to much discomfort, and are actually very, very serious diseases that are lifelong and can occur in newborns or any time throughout life, although most commonly in people of 20s and 30s years of age.
Right. And do we have any idea what causes the diseases?
Sure. Actually, these are two diseases that are known as complex diseases. So they're what that means is that there are both genetic risk factors, or genes, having an impact, and non-genetic risk factors. And one of the best known is smoking is a risk factor for Crohn's and colitis. And it's a combination of many different genetic and non-genetic risk factors. And actually, these two diseases are some of the best characterized in terms of their genetics and any other complex disease, be it heart disease or other. So we actually know quite a lot in terms of the genetics, and what the genetics is telling us is that a lot of what causes these two diseases is how the body actually interacts with the bugs in our guts. And so there's a lot that's been discovered in the last 5 to 10 years on these two diseases.
And the way it reacts is related to our genetic makeup.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Different genetic variants or different changes in different genes either protect us from developing these diseases or increase our risk to developing these diseases. And so that's teaching us a lot about the biology underlying these diseases.
So then it leaves me with a couple of questions. One of them is, why is the number increasing?
I'd like to give you a simple answer to that. The simplest answer is we don't know entirely, but I guess we can understand a little bit from comparing Canada to other countries, for example. So Canada has twice as much Crohn's and colitis than does Europe, for example. But even within Europe, you see differences. So it's much more frequent in Northern Europe versus Southern Europe. And so that gives you an indication that probably something related to climate has an impact. And we know that climate definitely impacts the bugs, the microbes within the environment, and so that potentially is one of the causes. So there's a different, what we call flora in your gut, or a different community of microbes, be they viruses, bacteria, or other. So that could be an important contribution. And actually supporting that is the fact that people coming from countries where there's very little Crohn's and colitis, or much less than in Canada, say from Japan or other parts of Asia, when they come to Canada, they develop Crohn's and colitis much more frequently than they would if they hadn't immigrated to Canada. So there's something in the genes, obviously, but obviously as well something non-genetic. And when we speak about environment, it's a very large thing, and it can be what we eat, whether we smoke or not, and as I said, the difference in the microbes in the environment can also have an impact.
We've had a listener send us a text message saying Crohn's disease has taken over my life for the past 10 years. Controlling it is complex, but I've been managing very well. So how does one manage a disease like that?
So I guess this is where the fact that these are complex diseases, different genetic risk factors and non-genetic risk factors. To simplify a little bit, it's almost as if each patient has a different combination of these different risk factors, genetic and non-genetic. And so, although their symptoms may be similar from one to the other, often the biology underlying is somewhat different. So, as a consequence, some people's disease is well managed by medication, and other people's disease is not well managed by medication. But no matter what, they're very serious diseases.
We have another message saying stress is a huge factor in I guess in triggering have you been able to establish that?
So not me personally, but it's a little more difficult to quantify. But definitely different patients seem to find that there are different triggers for what we call their episodes. So that any of these diseases, or either of these diseases, have periods of where the inflammation is very bad or the symptoms are very bad, and other periods where the disease is a little more quiescent or not as severe. And it's not uncommon to hear from patients that there are different elements, be it stress, be it dietary impact, lack of sleep, that seems to trigger for them. But underlying is a complex biological cause, which is somewhat hard to define on a radio call.
Right. No, I understand. Boy, what about turning to naturopathic remedies? Is there any evidence that can help?
So naturopathic really hasn't really proven to be all that successful to date. Based on the science showing that your gut microbes are important in health and disease. There have been a lot of research in the last decade on trying to improve your good bacteria or diminish your bad bacteria in your gut with what we call prebiotics and probiotics.
Right.
And unfortunately for Crohn's and colitis, really hasn't been all that successful, unfortunately.
And what about the first one that I mistakenly called the IBS? I think because we're seeing commercials now for medication treating irritable bowel syndrome, I guess.
Yes, I have to admit that I'm a lot less familiar with IBS, and it's a less well defined disease than Crohn's and colitis.
And not necessarily a precursor?
Oh no, they're very, very different diseases. They're very, very different, and maybe in terms of treatment for Crohn's and colitis, there actually are a fair number of treatments, and there has been a lot of progress in the last half decade or more on the treatment of both Crohn's and colitis with new types of medications which are very tailored for the biology, which is different between the patients. And so there is a lot of hope that in the next decade or so, with the better understanding of the biology, we'll actually have better medications available to patients, but also better ways of matching the right therapy to the patient as well.
All right. Well, that's encouraging. One last text message. At the stroke of 50, I developed lactose intolerance. I cannot eat cheese without suffering huge cramps and gas. How come?
So that's very different. So I mean, there are a lot of definitely a lot of different diseases and syndromes that have overlapping symptoms. So, for example, bloating, pain, abdominal discomfort, and that can be such things as what you mentioned before, IBS, celiac disease, allergies to certain foods, and therefore that's an example of the latter. That can give this discomfort, but I guess in looking at this in a positive light, somebody who has lactose intolerance, at least they know they have something that they can actually avoid and therefore be symptom free. Whereas in terms of Crohn's and colitis, it really is a lifelong disease, and as I said, that can start as early as at birth, and so these are extremely debilitating and have a huge burden on the Canadian health system.
Dr. Rioux, thank you very much for helping us understand and learn more about these diseases.
My pleasure. Thank you for your interest.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That's Dr. John D. Rioux. He's an associate professor of medicine at the University of Montreal, the Montreal Heart Institute. He's also the Canada Research Chair in Genetics and Genomic Medicine Inflammation. And on the phone now is Edna Mendelson. She's the executive manager of the Quebec branch of the Crohn's and Colitis Federation of Canada, the CCFC. Edna Mendelson, welcome to Radio Noon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell you, what is the best solution to finding a remedy to those suffering from Crohn's?
Well, as an executive director of the CCFC, I have not the knowledge nor the expertise to say where we can find it, but I can probably predict with some certainty that it's probably going to be found in Canada. Canada is the leading funder of research into Crohn's and colitis. And CCFC, the Crohn and Colitis Foundation of Canada, is the leading non-profit charitable organization that invests in research into a cure. Now, as you heard from Dr. Rioux, it's a complex chronic disease that many factors contribute to it, many triggers, and probably a cure will not be a single cure, but will have to be multiple cures. And in the meantime, all we have is medications to control the symptoms, and people who are affected by the disease, the best they can do at this point is manage their symptoms and go what we call into remission and continue as much as possible a regular life, basically.
Right. And what is the main function of the Crohn's and Colitis Federation of Canada?
Well, the organization was founded 39 years ago by parents of a child who was finally diagnosed with a disease after many years of tests, etc. 39 years ago, there was no tools to diagnose the disease, no known research into the disease, and no body of knowledge. And the greatest need at that time was to, first of all, invest in research and also in education and awareness of patients and the public. So we have had two-pronged mission since 39 years ago of investing in research and in education and awareness raising. Last year, we added another aspect to our mission, which is enhancing the quality of life of our patients, because investing only in a cure, it was which we don't know when will happen and when will be found out, was too long for people to wait while suffering. So we realized the importance of directing some activities into enhancing the quality of life of people who are suffering from the condition right now. So these are the three main missions of the organization. Our activities are to fundraise and support research. Last year we invested $5.4 million in research. Our partners are American partners. The American Crohn and Colitis invested $14 million. So per capita, Canada is definitely ahead in terms of investment. And the rest of the activities, we fundraise, we allocate money to research and to education.
Okay, so if anyone is interested in finding more, they can go to the Crohn's and Colitis Federation of Canada website.
The website, Crohn and Colitis Foundation of Canada. It's soon going to be changed to Crohn Coli Canada and Crohn Colitis Canada. Our name will be changed very soon in this coming April. But right now, our website is still under the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of Canada. There's information. We also publish pamphlets, which we distribute to hospitals.
And we'll put that information on our Facebook page to make it easy for people to find. Edna Mendelson, thank you very much for speaking with us.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Edna Mendelson is the executive manager of the Quebec branch of the Crohn's and Colitis Federation of Canada.